Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. Today we're going to try to get through a whole bunch of global happenings.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we've got business, we've got politics, and even a little bit of Hollywood history.
Sounds like a lot to cover.
It is, but that's why we call this a deep dive, right?
That's right. Dive right in.
Exactly. And you've given us a great set of news briefs, so let's just jump right in.
That's it.
Okay, so first, stop the Middle East, and a major power shift in Syria.
Oh, yeah.
After 54 years, Bashar al-Assad's regime has fallen.
Wow.
And, I have to admit, the speed of it all really caught me off guard.
Yeah, the swiftness is definitely noteworthy, and it raises the question, what happens now? The groups taking control, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, they've got a complicated past.
Complicated how?
Well, they evolved from al-Qaeda's Nusra Front. So understanding that history, I think, is going to be key to predicting their future actions.
Yeah, that's a past that I think would make a lot of people nervous. I mean, not exactly the image of stability, right? So what are the chances that we'll actually see a peaceful transition of power here?
Feel a truly peaceful transition. It's going to face some serious obstacles, I think. For one, you've got potential infighting among the different rebel groups. Then you've got the Syrian government remnants that are still vying for power. And of course, you can't forget the interest of all the regional players like Iran and Israel. I mean,
Right, they all want a piece of the pie.
exactly. It's a really complex web, and every player has their own agenda.
And speaking of agendas, your news briefs mentioned some suspected Israeli airstrikes in southern Syria. What's the strategic thinking there? What are they trying to accomplish?
Well, most likely it boils down to concerns about weapons falling into the wrong hands. Israel has a history of taking preemptive action to prevent advanced weaponry from reaching groups that they consider threats, and especially in such a volatile region.
Right, because who knows what could happen.
Exactly. And this really fits into the larger picture of geopolitics, that constant push and pull for influence in the Middle East.
So one powder keg ignites, another one starts simmering. All right, let's shift gears a bit and move across the globe to South Korea, where President Yoon is facing a political crisis of his own.
Oh, right.
Yeah, a controversial attempt to impose martial law has really backfired.
Yeah.
And now there are calls for his arrest. I mean, it sounds like utter chaos. How did things get to this point?
Well, this situation is deeply rooted in those allegations of Russian interference in the recent South Korean elections.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and these accusations are serious enough that the election results have actually been annulled, which has obviously thrown the entire country into turmoil.
So we've got a president desperately clinging to power, accusations of foreign meddling, and a population that's understandably on edge. What are the chances this escalates into violence?
It's a very real concern, unfortunately. With so much uncertainty surrounding the legitimacy of the government and, deep divisions within South Korea itself, things could easily spiral out of control. The future of South Korea's leadership, it's hanging in the balance. We'll have to see how this unfolds.
Yeah, definitely a situation we'll be tracking closely. All right, let's shift gears again this time from global politics to the world of business and tech. A couple of stories here caught my eye. First up, a major leadership shakeup at the Australian bank. ANZ CEO Shayne Elliott is reportedly stepping down.
Interesting.
And it seems like this is part of a larger trend we're seeing across the Australian banking sector. What's going on down under?
Well, Elliott's exit after 9 years at the helm, it's definitely significant. Especially considering the context. You see, there's an ongoing investigation by the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, or ASIC, into a bond trading scandal at the bank.
Oh, right. So ASIC, that's Australia's corporate watchdog, right?
Exactly. They're responsible for enforcing financial regulations, and this scandal has raised serious questions about ANZ's culture, and it likely contributed to Elliott's decision to retire.
Yeah, makes sense. So they're bringing in an outsider to fill that CEO role.
Yeah.
Which seems like a deliberate move, don't you think?
Absolutely. Choosing an external candidate suggests that they're looking for a fresh perspective, someone who can come in and potentially overhaul the bank's culture and their strategic direction. It'll be interesting to see who they ultimately choose and what changes they end up prioritizing. I think it sends a clear message that ANZ recognizes the need for a significant shift.
From one giant to another, looks like we might be witnessing a mega merger in the advertising world. Rumors are swirling that Omnicom and Interpublic, two of the biggest players, are considering joining forces.
Wow, if this deal actually goes through, the combined company would be colossal. I mean, it would surpass WPP as the world's largest advertising firm. It's a bold move for sure.
Driven by?
Well, the rapidly changing media landscape, with the rise of all these digital platforms.
Like Google and Meta, they've been shaking things up for traditional ad firms for a while now. Do you think that pressure to adapt is the main driver behind this potential merger?
I think it's definitely a major factor. Companies like Omnicom and Interpublic, they're feeling the heat to compete in this new digital world. And by merging, they can pool their resources and potentially gain a much stronger foothold against these tech giants.
Smart strategically. But a merger of this scale is bound to attract attention from regulators.
So absolutely. Antitrust scrutiny is inevitable. Regulators are going to be looking very closely at the potential for this combined entity to stifle competition and dominate the market. There will be a lot of hurdles to clear, and that will likely shape the final terms of any agreement.
High stakes all around.
Very high.
Speaking of tech giants and their impact, let's talk about TikTok. The legal battles in the U.S. just took a big turn. A U.S. appeals court upheld a law requiring ByteDance, TikTok's parent company, to divest its U.S. assets. If they don't comply, they could face a potential ban.
This is a pivotal moment in the whole ongoing saga of TikTok in the U.S., and this ruling highlights those serious national security concerns that are driving the government's actions. Essentially, they're worried that TikTok's Chinese ownership could put American user data at risk.
It's a sensitive issue for sure. And TikTok isn't backing down, right? They're going to fight this.
You bet. They've already announced plans to appeal to the Supreme Court. They're hoping to overturn this ruling. But in the meantime, they're trying to reassure advertisers that TikTok is still a safe bet. But this whole situation undeniably creates uncertainty. It's a high-stakes gamble for TikTok, and the outcome could have significant ripple effects on the entire social media landscape.
So if TikTok is forced out of the U.S. market, who wins, who loses?
Well, other platforms like Instagram and Reels, both owned by Meta, would likely benefit from TikTok's absence. They've already been trying to capture that short-form video audience, but it's also possible that a new player could emerge to fill that void. This kind of disruption often creates opportunities for innovation.
That's true. It's fascinating to see how these tech giants are constantly vying for dominance. And on that note, another story you shared caught my attention. Google renewing its licensing deal with Country Press Australia. I think this is a good opportunity to talk about the evolving relationship between these tech giants and news organizations, particularly in the context of Australia's News Media Bargaining Code.
Yeah, it's a complex and dynamic relationship full of tension. On one hand, news organizations need the reach and the revenue that platforms like Google provide. But on the other hand, they're wary of becoming too reliant on these tech giants and losing control over their content and their audience. It's a delicate balancing act.
And then you have the Australian government stepping in with its News Media Bargaining Code, which essentially tries to force platforms like Google and Meta to pay news outlets for their content. It's an attempt to level the playing field, but it hasn't been without its challenges, has it?
It's been a bit of a roller coaster, you know? The code has resulted in some pretty significant deals, but the future is uncertain. Meta, for example, they've already pulled back from some of those agreements. And Google has hinted at doing the same thing in New Zealand, where similar legislation is being considered.
Yeah, it's a real tug-of-war with high stakes for both sides, I guess.
Definitely.
It really underscores the challenges facing the media industry in this digital age, navigating those relationships with these tech giants. It's like walking a tightrope.
It really is.
Okay, before we wrap things up, I want to touch on a lighter story that you included. It's about Judy Garland's ruby slippers from The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
They just sold for a record-breaking $43 million.
Wow.
Can you imagine? I mean, those things are practically priceless.
It's incredible, isn't it? It really speaks to the enduring power of these iconic objects. You know, they represent so much more than just their material value. They capture our collective imagination and become cultural touchstones.
And there's a whole backstory to these particular slippers, too.
Oh, right.
They were stolen from the Judy Garland Museum back in 2005, and then miraculously recovered by the FBI in 2018. It's like a real-life Hollywood mystery.
It really is. That just adds another layer of intrigue to these already iconic artifacts. The fact that they were lost and then found, only to resurface and be sold for such an astronomical sum, it really fuels their mystique.
It's a nice reminder that even in a world dominated by headlines about political turmoil and technological disruption, there's still room for a bit of magic and nostalgia.
Absolutely. Sometimes it's those seemingly small, whimsical stories that help us connect with our shared humanity and find moments of joy amidst all the chaos.
Yeah, they offer a sense of wonder and remind us of the power of storytelling.
Well said.
So as we look back on this whirlwind tour of global events, from the fall of a regime in Syria to those potential mega mergers and the ongoing saga of TikTok, what stands out to you as the most significant development?
You know what strikes me is how all of these seemingly disparate events scattered across the globe, they all point towards a world in flux. We're seeing power dynamics shift, Traditional industries are grappling with technological disruption. And this ongoing struggle to navigate an increasingly complex and interconnected information landscape, it's a lot to process.
It's true. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the constant barrage of information. So how do we stay informed and engaged without getting lost in all the noise?
That's the crucial question. And honestly, there's no easy answer. I think it requires us to be much more mindful of our information consumption habits.
Like how so?
Well, for one, focusing on reliable sources, prioritizing information that's relevant to your own interests, and taking the time to reflect on the bigger picture, I think that can all help.
So it's not just about passively absorbing information. It's about actively engaging with it.
Exactly. Analyzing it critically and connecting the dots to see those larger patterns at play. It's about becoming informed citizens who can navigate this complex world with a sense of agency and purpose.
And that's an ongoing process, right?
It is. There's always more to learn, more to explore, and more to understand. It's about embracing that journey of discovery and recognizing that knowledge is a powerful tool for navigating the world around us.
So on that note, I want to leave you with a final thought-provoking question to ponder. Given the breakneck speed of change and the unpredictable nature of global events, how can you, our listener, stay informed and engaged without feeling overwhelmed? How can you make sense of it all and find your place in this ever-evolving world?
It is a challenge we all face these days, with this, I don't know what to call it, information overload.
Yeah, for sure.
It's about finding that balance, between staying informed and also safeguarding your own mental well-being. It's like recognizing that you don't have to know everything, and it's okay to step away from the news every now and then.
Yeah, that's such a good point. It's not about burying your head in the sand. It's about, finding healthy ways to engage with the world around you. And sometimes that means taking a break, prioritizing your own peace of mind. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. But before we go, I want to thank you for joining us on this whirlwind tour of global happenings. Hopefully you found it insightful and maybe even a little bit thought-provoking.
It's always a pleasure to, explore these complex issues and share these different perspectives.
And remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep connecting the dots. That's the beauty of a deep dive. It's just the beginning of a journey of discovery. Until next time.